Hello, welcome to the first episode of the Cerulean Skies RPG podcast. I'm your host, Joey, and I'm joined by two butts. We got Chetmanly and Thomas.
Hello. Good evening.
How you guys doing? Glad to be here and all that.
Hell yeah, glad to have you guys here. I figured this would be a fun thing to do weekly, bi-weekly, etc., because if you're not a part of the Cerulean Skies Discord, which, man, why aren't you?
No, why aren't you? Exactly.
Yeah, you fucking loser. But if you're not,
all the cool kids are doing it,
right? So why don't you fucking join and join
don't
our
you want to be
MLM?
cool?
Yeah, just fucking peer pressure. This is what you need. But we've been chatting a lot about RPGs, and I was like, I think it'd be fun to do something weekly with this. So we got the crew together. The plan is basically to do this every week with a rotating group, right? And sometimes we might have people who have been on before. Sometimes we might carry over a conversation or topic, but just like something to just keep going every week and see what we can do. So you might. These guys might be on next week. They may not. It all really depends on a lot of stuff. But it's really fun, and I'm really excited to do this. So let's start with some introductions. Thomas, we'll start with you, man. What are you known on the internet for?
Oh God, Old Bay seasoning. Yeah, I think mostly I would probably be known for just basically playing JRPGs, fitness. I've been big into fitness, wastewater operator, the occasional gaming suite, things of that nature. I'm just kind of trying to build out from there. I don't know that I necessarily have a brand per se on the internet, but I'm trying to, create some content with you guys, and hopefully I can sort of branch out from there, see how it all comes together.
Hell yeah, and I followed you back in the day because your name was an Evilise reference, and I was like, that's a boy. All right.
Yeah, my current at is a math reference because I'm a huge, math nerd. Like all with it. Chet.
Yeah, my handle is a old Archer reference based off of an old Burt Reynolds movie. So Chetmanly405. Mostly, you can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Chetmanly405. I mostly play narrative-based games, which a large portion of the time is JRPGs. Mostly I play games that have shaped my narrative because I'm trying to become a published author. So you guys will be able to say, oh man, well, once I become a famous author, they're like, what all has he done? And they'll go back and they'll find this episode and they'll be like, oh, he's always been there in my life. I just didn't know it. So yeah, so mostly JRPGs. You can also find me on YouTube if you search Chetmanly405. I just recently uploaded a short of what it was like buying video games at Funkoland in the 90s. It's a good time.
That's awesome.
Hell yeah. And Chet was actually on an episode of Super RPG Friends.
An absolute blast. Mm-hmm. That was a good time.
Which remind me after the show. Sorry, what were you going to say, Thomas?
I was going to say, what are you guys doing over there? You're still in your Lunar playthrough over on Super RPG Friends. Yeah.
That was a fucking good segue. That was really solid, dude.
Man, shame that didn't make it onto that what was it, the Genesis Mini 2 that they had put out, that there's no Lunar, like so disappointing. Mm-hmm. But if you looked at some of the negotiations, I guess they felt like it was going to sell out regardless of whether they put Lunar on it or not. But it sucks for the fans because that's not a very accessible game in 2022.
And I've only ever played Silver Star Story complete. So watching the Super RPG Friends play is it the Saturn version or the CD version?
Sega CD version. The Saturn version is complete, basically.
One thing, Mia looks way better in the CD version. And number two, that introduction, that opening movie. Oh my gosh.
Oh, no.
Fighting through the darkness.
Hell yeah. All is evil.
All the evil.
So we must press on. And that's another really good segue, because I think that's probably one of the things that we're going to be touching on today is just, like the old versus the new, because we're all old guys, right? Like we're retirees.
Don't let the mohawk fool you. There's more gray in me than there is color.
I was gonna say we all have some gray in the beard.
You just cut a little bit of gray off every time that some grew in, and now that's all you got left.
I'm sitting there, yeah, exactly. I'm sitting there like at the hairdresser. But they're a war trophy, not a badge of shame.
Yeah, there we go. That's the way to look. My rationale is like, okay, not right now, because I'll be 34 in like a couple weeks, and I don't want gray until I'm like 38. Like once I'm like ready to let go of the 30s, then the gray can come.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I don't want it. I'm trying, I'll start plucking him if I have to, man. That's just where I'm here.
I couldn't do that. I'd be
me either. Be like an all day.
I'm gonna say, Joey. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it. Mm-hmm. I started going gray at 34, so.
But
just throwing that out there.
Let's talk about the old school versus the new school. So, I mean, like, what did you want to touch on as far as that's concerned? I feel like more modern RPGs just have these quality of life features, things like fast travel, bonus experience. Like way better inventory management. Oh God, I could talk about that for an entire episode. I'm recently playing through Earthbound, and Earthbound is one of my favorite games on the planet. But good God, the inventory management in Earthbound needs a serious correction.
Brutal.
Even something as simple as not allowing your equipped items to count in your inventory screen would make that game like a million times better.
Simpable is also what Chet would use to describe Mia. A very simpable character.
She is very simpable.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
big fan. Big fan.
But I think about stuff like that all the time, because in the more modern games, unless the game is built around inventory management, I don't feel like it's something that I necessarily have to actively think about. Say something along the lines where you buy upgraded inventory slots, and that tends to be more of like an action RPG, open world type sort of thing, as opposed to like a traditional JRPG. I'm gonna make the argument, like right now playing through Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I haven't had to think about my inventory in ages, other than just trying to get it organized, which is a nightmare in and of itself.
That's the thing, that's UX for sure. But no, I think you're too good at transitions, so I'll peel it back a little bit, because you said that Earthbound was one of your favorite RPGs. So one thing I kind of wanted to do with this podcast is, like, because we're going to be having like a slightly rotating, it's an open rotating door policy, okay? It's a
Very
safe space, you matter. Because of that, like, I do kind of want to like get a probe for what people's tastes are, even if I already know them. You're like, we're talking to people. Like one or two people might watch this. Who knows? So, Chet, we'll start with you, man. Like, what are some of your favorite games? And you can choose to talk a little bit, or favorite RPGs rather. And you can choose to talk about which ones, or you can just kind of name drop whatever you want to do.
I just because every opportunity I have to name drop this game, I will, because it is the first RPG I ever played, which was Miracle Warriors for the Sega Master System. So as soon as I can find some people who'd be like, oh yeah, I love Miracle Warriors too. Like the streaming journey is complete. Like I have found my people, but it just hasn't happened yet. Miracle Warriors, guys? No.
I'm apparently very good at transitions, but you're on your own there. My God.
No, dude, that game rules. I actually played through that like kind of recently, because when we started our Sega arc for Super RPG Friends, I was like, I am the archivist. I'm going to go and play every fucking Sega Genesis and Maga system. Yeah, it's
no politics.
You explain the rules to us.
Yeah.
Maga system. That sucks. That would be the worst system ever.
That would suck.
Oh, that'd be fucking awful.
You would actually just give a lot of money to it and it wouldn't work.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, the Master System, if you had the 3D glasses, that might have been the case too.
That's true.
But Miracle Warriors, I love that game. I would say Miracle Warriors is where I developed my love for soundtracks in video games as well, because you could sit back and listen to Miracle Warriors. It only had like 5 different songs, but there were 5 amazing songs. It's
All
also
bangers.
the first time that little Chetmanly ever saw boobies. I talked about that in the last stream because the boss, I don't know, the boss for some reason, she's like a green snake lady, and is topless. So it's very impactful. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite, but it's definitely impactful. Final Fantasy VI is way
classic.
up there. Way up
Classic
there.
pick.
A lot of people say that your first Final Fantasy is your favorite Final Fantasy. So that might be a little bit of that, because that's where I jumped into the Final Fantasy series was 6. But even still, going back and thinking about the narrative choices that they make in that game, the soundtrack to that game, the fact that there's no real strong protagonist, but that all the characters are strong characters in of themselves. I love 6. Absolutely love it.
If you allow me to just like intervene here, I see you have a lot of like Marvel stuff behind you, you know, like the cap shields and stuff like that. And a lot of people say that 6 is almost like the Avengers of those games, because every character has their own little moment to shine.
I have never heard that, but I love that.
That's actually that's good.
Especially when you get more into like the second half of the game, when you're kind of going back and getting everybody, you know, they all kind of come to their own resolutions right before they face off against Kefka. And that's one of my favorite things about 6. And you're talking about soundtracks and games, like that's Uematsu's best work. I'm just gonna. I would have to argue with you on that one.
I don't think you're gonna get an argument from me on that one.
No, we're just like, yep.
It's pretty up there. I do love. I like that though, that they all do get their time to shine. And then when I talk to people who like 6, if you're to ask them who the protagonist of that story is, everybody has a different character, because they have a character that they identify with. And so that's just how flushed out the characters are and their stories are. But obviously Edgar is the best character in Final Fantasy VI.
Overpowered throughout the entire game.
Exactly. The first time I found that auto crossbow, man, it was over. But my favorite RPG, and even going outside of RPGs, my favorite game of all time is Xenogears. That game came at the right time, right place, perfect mixture of everything that I loved about RPGs. Incredibly impactful in not only my storytelling, but just like we were talking about it before we got on here, like I actually researched the id, ego, and super ego, and so a very strong part of what helped me during my development years, because I played it when I was 16, was Xenogears. And that game, it has a very important part, but also it is an absolutely amazing game. Top notch. Favorite RPG, hands down.
I've said this before, but Xenogears, I mean, I knew God was dead, but then I played Xenogears.
But then you played Xenogears,
and I was like, God's dead. Yeah, okay. All right.
That was my first.
We killed him. He's a bunch of TVs. Turns out.
That was my first. That was my first ever God's Dead game. Was Xenogears for sure.
I think mine was Final Fantasy Legend 1 or Saga 1. Because in that game you could chainsaw God.
About that one. Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
That's on the that's on a collection somewhere, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, the Saga collection for Switch.
Yeah.
And PC
now.
Final
Fantasy Adventure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked like before we did this. Joey was like, we could probably just talk about Saga for like an hour and a half. Yeah. Saga would be one of my Saga Frontier is one of my personal favorite games. Just of all time, because I loved, especially the remastered version, because that just kind of like patched all those holes that they couldn't get to, or they didn't have space for, or whatever, what have you. But that's a game that everything just hit for me, and it did the interconnected stories thing. So where you could be playing through one person, but you knew what another one was going through at that precise moment in time. It didn't delve all its systems out to you, so the joy of discovery and figuring out, even just something as simple as sparking techniques was just a complete thrill for me. The strategy guide was not very helpful.
It was wrong. It was a lot of that's a reoccurring theme across the 90s for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Well, I guess back then, like if you misprinted something in a strategy guide, it just stayed there forever. You know,
Right.
I spoke about Earthbound earlier. I spent up until like 6 days ago, I thought that you could get the Gutsy Bat by fighting the Krakens in Ness's Dream World, and here it turns out that you actually can't get it until right before the last boss. You know, so it's like that old meme about like how if somebody believes something wrong, you ask your grandmother, and that misinformation just carried on for 40 years. Like that's the JRPG equivalent of that, or the 90s strategy guides where you're like, no, actually, like they're, you know, there is a way to get like General Leo in Final Fantasy VI, you know, type sort of thing.
Yeah, it's called
yeah,
it's called a Game Genie.
It's called.
So that's what did it.
What was the magazine that always posted the April Fool's jokes? Was that Game Pro?
Game Informer does that.
Game Informer. Yeah.
They did. I know Game Informer does the Game Enforcer, but I think Game Pro would always do like they would do an April Fool's joke, but they wouldn't like tell you what it was in the magazine. It would always be like, oh, here's the Laura Croft nude code.
That probably made people so thirsty. I hate that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Did you have any other games you wanted to touch on there, Chet? Because I feel like I just cut you off, but
no.
You know, okay.
No, I'm not important. It's fine.
No.
Yeah, fuck you, dude.
No, but someone mentioned Chrono Trigger, and it's like the Super Nintendo Squaresoft lineup is super strong, incredibly strong. Chrono Trigger's got to be way up there for me as well, which is where I was introduced to Mitsuda, who does the soundtrack for Xenogears. And that dude is amazing.
Who was the director on Xenogears?
Takahashi.
That's it, yeah. I believe that was his first game. I think that was it.
As a director, yeah. But he had worked on a bunch of Final Fantasy before. As usually, I think a sprite or environmental designer.
And I might be wrong. I'm not claiming authority in this. This could be internet rumor, but is it true that like the story for Xenogears was originally supposed to be Final Fantasy VII?
So what?
But
happened
then they said
it
was too dark.
They had like different story concepts for FF7, that they were trying to go through to decide as story treatment what they wanted to do, and for a while Xenogears was briefly considered that, and then when they're like, yeah, it's too dark. Why don't you develop this into a different game? And then it became a sequel to Chrono Trigger originally. And you have Kato, who wrote for Chrono Trigger as well, and he did a lot of the scenario stuff, and you could really tell what stuff he wrote. The Shivat stuff, that's not Zeal, bro. What are you talking about?
Right, exactly. It's like, this seems a little bit familiar.
And then you see the what's her name? Saga, Takahashi's wife. She wrote her last name is Saga, but I forgot her first name. But she wrote,
I got Mia on the brain.
She wrote the twins, the Figaro twins in FF6, and I mean Bart and Sigurd, Roni, bro, it's the desert. Yeah. Come on, it's really really similar. Also,
their castle goes under the sand.
Right. Just called Yggdrasil. It's fine.
I remember playing that as a kid, and that scene blew my mind. You know, just awesome stuff. And then when you go back in the world of Ruin, it's even like, you know, just cool.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
So, I'll use. Damn it! There's a segue here I can use, but I'm gonna refute it. Just a real quick aside, because you mentioned Yasunori Mitsuda, the composer. If you guys want to see something like absolutely mind blowing, Google Front Mission Gun Hazard and look at the composers on that. It's insane.
Man, that was a late Super Nintendo. That was a late.
That was late. That was like
it was a
95.
Famicom game.
96.
I would say like 90, late 95, 96.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see. I guess they have that remastered one coming out at some point. I don't know if that's this year or next year.
It's supposed to be this summer, but we haven't heard anything about it. So cool.
Like they just say we had the announcement. It's been the year of SRPGs. I would make the case for, you know, you had a triangle. I mean, you had Triangle Strategy, Dio Field Chronicle. Tactics Ogre is hitting again. You know, they're really testing the waters with those kinds of things. Final Fantasy Tactics, still one of my favorite games of all time. I mean, the Evilly setting is just phenomenal. And that's another game that just has incredible music. Even like that intro movie, that those chords that like lead up to the piano melody, just incredible stuff.
I have to commend you for reeling in the East Coast accent there. You almost said warder, and you stopped yourself. You almost said it, man.
If Jewel is listening to me, she will absolutely be like, "Yeah, he doesn't talk like that."
Dude, it slips though, man. Because I don't say beppers or like I don't say apple or Halloween, but like sometimes, man, it just slips, and there's something you can do about it. And what's up, Encyclo? But yeah, I think that's another topic that we wanted to focus on today. But I will use your FF6 segue because that is one of my favorite JRPGs. So there's nothing to say about that we haven't already. However, I will ask chat what your favorite FF6 character is, because I think that's the new Myers-Briggs to me.
Right.
So fun Thomas fact, I share a birthday with Gal in FF6. Gal and I have the same birthday, which is April 5th. And it's funny because as a child, when I played through that game, I hated Gal. I was like,
he's the worst character.
I was like, I can't use this character at all. But then, like, as an adult, I'm like, wait a minute, this guy's overpowered as all hell. Like, he has access to all these crazy spells before anybody else gets them. You just have to be willing to cede control of him. But I've had some crazy moments with him in that game. My personal favorite FF6 character, I would have to. Oh man, that's a tough one.
It is tough, isn't it?
Umaro. No.
The contrarian's answer.
I'd have to say, I'd probably say Shadow. All nonsense, aside, because I just love that he just can't. His story is fed to you so slowly, but it's just it's a good trip. Even the way that his dog is like integrated into battle, where it will sometimes take hits for him, is just such a nice touch. You know what I mean? Well done, Square Enix.
I remember the first time I was playing, and you pick him up, and then he leaves, and you're like, "What the fuck?" Because during the Phantom Train, he can leave at any time.
He can really screw you in save scenario pretty bad if you're not, if you get unlucky with the RNG or whatever. Joey, do you have a favorite character?
Yeah, Locke and Celeste. Locke and Celeste.
Yeah, Locke and Celeste, man, they're the real love story.
Great dynamic there. I mean, we talked about Xenogears, and you could talk about Faye and Ellie. As far as like all that kind of stuff is concerned, man. That's almost like, I know that you'd listen to. I just want to ask Joey, because you said that you'd listen to a Small Two Pieces. You had ignored that song for like 15 years, and you're like, yeah, rip my heart right out.
Yeah.
So
damn, another segue. Xenogears is also one of my favorite RPGs ever. But like, so I've said this a million times in the last couple of things I've been on, and I was talking to Chet about it before we started. But like I hadn't played Xenogears since 1999 or 2000 or something, when I learned God is Dead. And
yes,
I remember hearing the final song in that game, the closing song, Small Two Pieces. And it's like a really kind of cheesy, like overly emotional, dramatic vocal track, but it's fucking amazing. It like the lyrics like perfectly encapsulate the themes of the game. It incorporates leitmotifs and melodies that you hear throughout the game into like what is conclusively the last thing that you actually hear in the game proper. Apart from the audible gasp that you make when you see Xenogears Episode 5, and you're like, what the fuck is that? Well, I just played Episode 5. I got Star Wars, bro. But yeah, no, I purposely avoided listening to that song for 20 years because like when YouTube first came out and like, it was really easier and accessible to download game music or just, type in whatever and be able to stream it. And I was like, I think I want to replay the game because I don't really remember some of the story. I want to hear the full context of it. And then, and like, then I remember somebody linked it to me during my playthrough of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It might have been Solstice, actually. And I was like, nope, not going to listen to it. I'm not going to do it. because I want to hear it.
That Solstice is always trying to tempt you.
Yeah. yeah. It's
bad
such
influence, but he did fill in for me when I was late, so I can't really say anything about him for at least a week, maybe 2.
Yeah, you could give him a couple days grace period.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say FF6, Xenogears, which is, I know that's like, those are kind of like boring answers or whatever, but I don't care. They're really good. Baten Kaitos, really up there for me. I would put, okay, so I'm cheating, right? I'm counting the Baten Kaitos games as the duology as one game, because I think it was sort of intended or something. Those games are really fucking good, and maybe that's another Xenogears thing where I'm like, I just haven't replayed it in so long, and like they're staying high up on the list just because. Also maybe Ys 8 or Ys Origin.
Ys 8 is so good.
Ys 8 is so
good. Speaking of, Ys 8 has a Sunshine Coastline.
Yeah.
That's one of my all-time favorite tracks in a video game ever. Like the way the guitar and the drums hit. I will run to that. So like that song comes on, I'm like, let's go. You know, I was gonna say, like, if you don't, for myself personally, some favorite games. I mean, I'd already talked about Saga. We could do a whole podcast series on Saga. Let me think for a second here. The Suikoden game, the Suikoden games on the PlayStation. You know, Suikoden 1, Suikoden 2, and the third and the fifth game. I don't really like the fourth game, but I think those are just solid games, and I wish Konami would just port them or something. But Konami hates games.
Konami doesn't like anything.
Like, they just hate games, and they're just not going to, do anything with that series, which is a damn shame. They have that spiritual successor that had just dropped a trailer today. I can't remember which one it was.
Eiyuden Chronicle.
That's it, yes. And I haven't gotten a chance to check that out yet, so my expectations for that are not through the roof, but I'm just hoping it does the series justice.
Are you a Suikoden fan, Chet, at all?
I'm going to wait till you're done taking a drink.
Mm-hmm.
I've never played a Suikoden game.
Oh, man, it happens.
Oh, man. You don't know what you're missing out on.
Yeah, I've actually heard they're phenomenal. I'll tell you what, Suikoden, it has a mechanic in it, or not really a mechanic. You guys will think of the right word. The same thing with Chrono Cross, where the multitude of characters
feature
and
I guess.
me, me.
Absolutely.
Whenever I feel like I'm missing something, I'm actually going through it right now. I'm living my worst nightmare because I'm playing 10-2 on stream, and I'm trying to get 100% on 10-2. And if you watch my streams, I'm a fucking mess because I hate, like, if you don't listen to this, you might miss 2% of 100%. And I'm just like, oh. So Suikoden and has that same thing for me.
Some Suikoden stuff is permanently missable, but if you follow a guide pretty closely, I think you'll be all right. But I really hope you're not going for the platinum in that game, because Joey and I will have to stage an intervention, because
it's rough, man. That's a rough plat. And thank you for the follow, Encyclo.
We were just talking about that in the Discord not that long ago, and that game is really not designed with trophies in mind, because most of them are permanently missable. Even parts of the story.
Yeah, and that's brutal. That's brutal.
I love 10-2's battle system. I don't like the story is decent. But it's one of them games that I really should just go back and revisit it. How are you finding it?
Well, like 10. So if I were to list like my top 5 RPGs, Final Fantasy X is in my top 5.
Ooh.
Joey and I are noted 10 haters.
Yeah.
Really?
And
okay.
Solstice too, honestly. Yeah,
okay. Well, I thought we were going to be friends, but I guess I'm not getting invited back.
No.
But that's all right. So if I'm not getting invited back, I'm saying my piece.
You don't have the exact opinion as me, dude.
Right. What is this, Twitter? Okay. So Final Fantasy X. What kills me about Final Fantasy X, just from a storyteller's perspective, they kill it in the end. Number one, Auron. Final Fantasy VI is my favorite Final Fantasy, but Auron is my favorite Final Fantasy character. I love him so much. But the build up to the end of 10 and how 10 ends, like I'd never experienced anything like that before. So young adult Chetmanly sitting down playing that, basically from the time where you find out who Jecht, like the resigned to his fate that Jecht has, talking to Titus, which is the proper way to pronounce it.
Nope.
No.
According to Dissidia,
Well,
the proper way to pronounce it is Titus. But when he's talking to him, and he's basically like, "You gotta kill me, kid. Like I was hard on you your whole life, and you have all these daddy issues because you need to kill me because I'm a big whale monster now." So you kill God and you sort of kill God. Yeah, you do kill God.
You do kill
in
God,
Final
yeah.
Fantasy X. You kill Yevon.
Yeah, that you do.
The moment that Jecht's giant hand comes down and the music starts playing, the hardcore metal Underworld. Yeah. As soon as that starts playing, all the way until the end credits, Final Fantasy X is burned into my brain. Just because it's an amazing ending. So with that ending and it being so impactful, I want Final Fantasy X-2 to pick up from that, and it does not.
It does not. It never does. It never does.
So, and to be fair to that particular game, I think that would be a very tall order to climb.
Yes, it's unfair.
I just have to say this before I forget it. I do remember at the time of Final Fantasy X's release, one of the first tracks, I remember I bought the soundtrack because EB Games, which I guess still exists in Canada and
in Australia.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, in Australia. Oh, Seth.
Speaking of which, fuck Seth, dude. Dude saw. No, I'm kidding. I love you, Seth.
Yeah. Sloppy woodwork. Anyways, I remember they were selling an audio CD of it, and I went back and played it, and the second song I heard from it was Another World, and it was so metal for a Final Fantasy track.
Right.
And I was just like, I don't know what kind of direction they're going in with this, but I'm digging it. You know, it was just such a jolt because, especially coming off of 9, which had such a strange development, that for them to be taking that direction with it, I was all in for it. 10 is a game that I really loved at the time I played it, and I've replayed it since then, and I will always maintain that it's a decent, it's a good game to go through once, but it's one of the least replayable Final Fantasy games.
Especially if you try to do everything in it.
Yeah,
yes, trying to get the platinum in that game is rough.
Yeah, you have unskippable cutscenes. You have the temples are not the temples suck. You know, and most of the characters' ultimate weapons are tied to mini games and not anything that you necessarily achieve in battle or development of said characters. So that's just the thing for me. My personal favorite Final Fantasy is 12. Which I've talked about, ad nauseum on my Twitter. Yeah, Evilise, but also the characters. I love Bosch, love Ash. That's my personal favorite relationship in the series. And I am, as Joey described, and this is a word that I use all the time now, a job slut. And the Zodiac Age gives you a really good level of customization over. Yeah, you can be as big of a job slut as you want. It's not, again, it has just enough of that, that. Almost like I don't want to talk about Saga way more than I ever intended to. Just enough of it not giving you information that you have to figure it out on your own, but just accessible enough that you're not completely in the dark.
Right.
We had talked about this before we got on here. We were all Sega kids growing up, and so one of my all-time favorites is Phantasy Star 4, End of the Millennium. So Phantasy Star 4, and that was another game that just that title sequence. That the build up to that, how it references the previous games in the series. I just think that is absolutely incredible.
Hell yeah.
Continuity. Chetmanly is a big fan of continuity.
But not so much of Final Fantasy X too.
Well, here I do want to say because there's people on here. Some of my communities in here, and I'm not here to bag on Final Fantasy X too. I'm wholeheartedly admitting that I'm being unfair to it, because I want it to be more of 10, and that it was never designed to be that. From a story perspective, you just kind of think about the Final Fantasy X world was so encapsulated in death, and it's called Spira because it's a spiral of death and despondency. So you have your whole entire world is being held captive by this constant threat and this overbearing religion, and then it's just gone. So how would you react to that? So you if you put it in perspective like that, going out on a Charlie's Angels-esque adventure and singing and dancing just because you're free, it kind of makes sense. So I'm being being a little bit unfair to it. And I thoroughly enjoy the battle system. It takes me a while to get used to the music, but as the music just kind of gets burned in your brain a little bit.
I mean, job slut.
Big into it. So that's right up your alley.
I mean, so absolutely loved that. And there were some really cool, unique classes in that game. I'm a sucker for any kind of unique classes, especially in Final Fantasy games, where those classes are really unique. I think it's just called Gunner.
I think there's two.
There's two. There's like a weird, like gun mage or something.
Yeah, there's a gun mage, and then I think there's a gunner.
Yeah, okay.
I love guns in JRPGs as long as they're just not like, I don't know how to say this. It's like there can't be too many of them. You know what I mean? Like just
Saga
like
guns
here or there. Yeah.
Saga guns are great because of that. It's like an option.
Cool. Just enough. The Saga guns are great on a robot for sure.
Is it Irvin from 8 is the gun guy?
Yeah.
Is that his name? I love that guy.
He had a great theme, great musical theme. Like especially when you first meet him and he's all cocky and sure of himself, and like he's got just like that Western influence in his design. And I don't mean Western like Western part of the world. I mean like Old West.
Yeah.
Right. The long trench coat, the duster.
He looks like Marcello Mastroianni. the old Italian actor, dude. I actually made a mashup of Marcello Mastroianni and Auron, and it looks for the cover of 8.5.
Like almost completely similar.
Dude, I'll find it.
8.5.
Final Fantasy 8.5. Yeah, it was gonna happen.
It's nothing but Tetramaster.
Yeah, or Triple Triad.
A Triple Triad. Yeah, sorry. The far superior card game.
Oh yeah,
Triple Triad.
Without a doubt. Yeah, it's not even close.
Even the people that like Tetramaster, it's not fun.
It was like they sat down and they're like, "Hey, we got Triple Triad. People love it. How can we make it fucking suck? Oh, let's do this. Let's do Tetramaster."
My personal strategy for Tetramaster was to put a card down and just hope it worked out.
And just pray.
Dude, I play it like the Xenogears card game where I'm just pressing buttons.
Oh my
gosh, and pressing left and right and just pressing buttons. It's the only way to do it. But
God, and you're running back and forth.
Yeah, you have to run around.
You have to gotta throw them in there before that card game on the ship is torturous.
Do you know there's a hack to it? Do you know what the hack is?
No.
You pause it right when the cards come, and then you could quickly react.
Oh wow.
So that's what I did, and I had pause buffering. I had no trouble with it because of that once I figured that out. And I was like, I'm going to use it because that's unfair. The AI fucking cheats, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely not. Somebody had talked about how they had gone after the platinum in Final Fantasy IX, and I forget what it was. There's some sort of shell game in that. There's some sort of shell mini game where somebody's like moving stuff around or whatever, and he had to record it on his phone and then slow the speed down in order to actually get the trophy for it because he just could not figure it out.
So that's the only.
Xenogears is a great game. Xenogears is a great game, but the mini games in that. I mean, did you do the fighting game?
I love the fighting game, dude. It's so sick.
That's the first time that I bought an analog controller for the PlayStation because it doesn't work throughout the whole game, but it works in the fighting game.
It's so good, dude. That fighting game fucking rules, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like it feels like Virtual On at home.
Oh god, I love Virtual On. That game did not work without the twin sticks, though.
Yeah.
What was I just gonna say? Something about.
Did you get the rock paper scissors badge?
On my first try. Yeah, literally my first try. Yeah.
You already told me that.
That's crazy.
So
that's crazy talk.
I was like fully prepared to use save states. I made a save state right before it, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna use save states. This is bullshit. And then I noticed he has kind of a tell. Like he'll be
Really?
like, it has a. I figured out. I hacked the mainframe, and I saw the. Okay, dude, I am fully admitting to the fact that this could have just been luck, right? Like it's very possible. But it seemed to follow a pattern, and I followed that pattern and did it. So like, and I have shit for luck, like absolute piss luck. But maybe the universe aligned.
Just that.
Yeah.
I remember after you told me you got through it, I was like, make a save file there. You're like, why? That was easy. I'm like, maybe for you. Like, 2 hours
Wasting all that gold.
That damn game. I don't really, to be truthful with you, I don't really remember that fighting mini game. I just remember that it existed, but I remember Square was really dipping their toes in fighting games at that time. That's when they had released Ergeist Tobal number 1 and 2.
Man.
You know, Tobal number 2 was great, by the way. But just like one of them, those early PlayStation fight. I mean, I realize we're talking about JRPGs, but the early PlayStation fighters, that was Square's most experimental era, in my opinion. They've never really gotten back to that, taking chances. You know, games like Parasite Eve and Xenogears. Even Chrono Cross was a really bold direction.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, at the time, like they took that simple concept of, instead of a time, they were going to do like world jumping, but that was a game that really bent the bar back over and, you know, snapped it. And I think that was the best for myself personally. That was probably their best era. Even, you know, when they were able to work with CD quality audio for the first time, it was like this whole world just opened up for them.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that.
Was Parasite Eve the game that released that had the demo disc that had Final Fantasy VIII and Xenogears on it?
Xenogears.
Yeah.
I remember that demo so well because I remember when you're walking up through the second area, I think Bart and Rico join you and they jump down and they're just like
break the fourth wall,
and you can see all their death blows. It's I remember playing through that after I finished the game, and I'm like,
I think I ever played a demo. Yeah,
it's the era of demo discs is nuts, man. But definitely check that out at some point or another. I'll see if I can find a YouTube link for you.
I have it. I have the demo disc. Maybe I'll just try it out.
I think that demo ends when Faye gets to the wooded area. I could be wrong.
Is it different than the game? Because you said that Bart and Rico jumped down. I'm like, when the fuck is that?
I think they're just showing off the battle system. They want to show you what it can do. It's the area going to Satan's house.
Yeah.
Okay.
That little area there.
And it's very fourth wall breaking. I mean, Xenogears is very fourth wall breaking as it is anyway. And that game's even got some like really rudimentary jump scares in it, like when Citan, like when Citan starts to explain to you who he really is and things along those lines. Just amazing storytelling, though. Honestly, it's like you said, like it's not much you can say about that game that hasn't already been said. But you know, seeing as we're on topic,
so I think you brought up a good point that I'll highlight, and I'll also harken it back to FF10 too. So I agree that era was probably the most experimental, and I think like you see so much of that. I don't really think RPGs do that anymore, and I get it. That like in a way you can't. You have to be both more cavalier with your creativity and far more safe at the same time, right? Because like long tail market means that you could be more creative, but like in terms of actually getting those sales, like it's more consistent for you to be safe and to appeal to as many people as possible. And hey, thanks for is this coming up? Thank you for the follow. Sorry, all my stuff is all messed up. But yeah, but the experimental phase ended because of a little thing that you may have heard of, a little endeavor that SquareSoft decided to do.
Is it a movie?
It's probably a movie. It's called The Spirits Within.
Oh my gosh!
You'll notice how I omitted the Final Fantasy subtitle from that. But yeah, so no, that like basically. It did a number on Square's like profits, and it didn't really necessarily bankrupt them, but it was definitely making them hurt. A bunch of things bankrupted them, but regardless, that also axed a Xenogears sequel because there was supposed to be, they were actually giving the keys to Takahashi to some extent to be able to make more games with that IP. Even though the game didn't do amazingly well, it did well enough to warrant a sequel, and it was ambitious, and Square was really pushing that. And I think like the devs learned so much from their inexperience with Xenogears, and that was like, what a game to cut your teeth on, man. Holy shit.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah, absolutely.
But so the creativity started to almost flatline around then because Square at the time was like, oh crap, how do we recoup our losses? And so they're like, well, FF10 sold really well. Why don't we just do the Majora's Mask thing and take a bunch of assets from FF10, reuse them, and make it an easy, I'm not trying to imply that like 10.2 doesn't have like the level of genius or whatever, or like the high quality that 10 does, because like that's subjective, right? But I do think that that's one of the reasons why I don't personally like 10.2, because it feels like the gameplay just feels like a huge rehash despite this incredible new battle system that they added.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So I was just playing through it yesterday, and I was in the Thunder Plains, and in 10, when you go to the Thunder Plains, there's this whole Cactar mini game with the stones, and you have to go to each Cactar stone, and you have to dodge the lightning. Well, I was in the Thunder Plains last night on 10.2, and the Cactar stones are still there. They're just pointless. It's like, they still are just exist in the world because they just completely reuse the map.
I'm trying to think of a recent RPG that I played through, and I'm like, that one really took some risks. And it's like you had talked about like a Diofield, whatever, however you want to say, Diofield Chronicle, and how you're like, this game feels risky, but also incredibly safe at the same time, just based on the demo, where they know they're catering to a very specific audience. And I'm really kind of, jogging my memory here to try to think of a recent JRPG or
I would say
where I'm just like, yeah, that game really like pushed some boundaries.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying that everything is just vanilla and,
right.
Those games don't have value or anything along those lines by any stretch of the imagination.
It's just a harder ceiling to break.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the question sort of becomes, well, like what hasn't been done? Like how do you make things different? How do you truly make things different? I would say you could probably find that in visual novel type games like 13 Sentinels. That was
I think that's probably what I'd put that up
was a pretty fairly original game as far as the concept that it's an RTS inside of a visual novel, not exactly typical. But I had recently played through stuff like Bravely Default 2, and I liked Bravely Default 2, job slut. But also,
I was gonna say it's shit.
But also, if you haven't picked up on that theme by now, I got no hope for you. But but also like that was another like very typically safe JRPG, like almost too much so at some points. I think that I don't know, it's like, I see the new Star Ocean title and I'm like, we talked about, it's like, please just don't be mid.
Yeah.
Take some risk.
Just be a 6.5, man. Just be a 6.5.
Take some risks, because what made the original Star Ocean back on the Famicom, and then they released that sequel, that was something that hadn't really been done at that point, where you had this sort of like deep crafting system that involved your party members and intergalactic travel. I mean, the original Star Ocean is kind of a tough playthrough at this point because it centers around a pandemic, but it's still, is what it is as far as originality is concerned. What was the PlayStation 2? Till the End of Time?
Yeah, that was 3.
Yeah, or 3. That's a game that really took some risks with its story as well.
Yeah, I love that story.
Very polarizing game. You either loved it or hated it. I was in the hated it camp, but I've started to replay through it, and I'm starting to appreciate it a lot more on my second go around, because they explore some really good themes there.
So, by the way, this is belated, but thank you, Dragon Link, for stopping in and saying, hey, appreciate it. But secondly, and this is going to be a good topic for Chet because I know his feelings on anime. But like one of the things that you see, there's like this Venn diagram, right? Like here are JRPG stories, here is anime, and it's always been like pretty
close, pretty similar.
But like I think the PS1 era really started blending that more, right? Because I mean, even Xenogears, like the whole
they just put straight up anime into my Xenogears.
they literally, yeah, and like the Evangelion influence, like some of the more like political Gundam influence, the god stuff that comes from anime and manga and whatever. And so like you started to see that blend more, and then you started to see stuff like Chrono Cross, Valkyrie Profile, games like this that like really started to mess a little bit with the way the stories are told in the game. And if you look at modern games now, you really see that influence. Ys 8 is
Profile
really
especially.
yeah.
Doctor Profile especially is a game that, you almost kind of had to you had to kind of not follow the way the game was instructing you to play it to get the most out of the story. You had to go a little bit rogue, but the game doesn't really tell you how to do that.
Right.
But
the whole point of that game is the Valkyrie going rogue.
Yeah. You want to talk about like how the anime influence, like, you're not really for anime type stuff in JRPGs? I'm not an anime fan by any stretch of the imagination. I have like my classic animes that I like Cowboy Bebop and like Evangelion and Gundam and stuff like that. I can watch stuff like that just fine, but the newer stuff doesn't land for me.
Yeah, it's not hard.
I think that sometimes once you get out of that, once you stop watching anime, it's really hard to get back into it. Like it really, really, really is. But did you want to, Joey had asked you a question, and here I am talking about it, yeah.
That's fine. I don't like anime. That's the answer to my question. No, okay, so let me explain. Okay, because I again, if you enjoy anime, that's perfectly fine. Please enjoy what you enjoy, as long as it's not hurtful to yourself or hurtful to each other. There's a whole lot of fandoms I'm not into. I'm not a big fan of time traveling as a storytelling tool, so I don't like a lot of Doctor Who. But when it comes to JRPGs and anime and crossing that divide, when you mentioned the influences of the PS1 era, and you're saying Evangelion and Gundam, those are some of the best animes ever written.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
what happened was anime became so formulaic, especially around the Dragon Ball Z, westernized Dragon Ball Z era, and some of those tropes that it's not an anime exclusive trope. Deus Ex Machina is not an anime exclusive trope. However, a ton of anime involves Deus Ex Machina. Thank you, Dragon Ball Z, basically. Digimon, whatever it might be, just a ton of Deus Ex Machina. So there are certain storytelling aspects of anime that became incredibly formulaic, and then that bled into a lot of JRPGs, as I feel like JRPGs and then westernized RPGs, which kind of happened around the Xbox era when Microsoft came out and you started playing things like Morrowind and different games, like the storytelling techniques kind of really started to rift. And now JRPGs, like I'm playing through Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and it's like this is anime as fuck, man.
Yeah, but it's like
there's anime, and then there's like anime.
Right. It just depends on how it's going to hit, and it depends on the storytelling technique. I personally am thoroughly enjoying Xenoblade Chronicles 3 until I don't want to. That's a new game, so I don't want to talk about the story of 3 because I don't want to be spoilery. But I just had something happen to me in chapter 3 where I was like, wait, what? Are you going to start introducing this to it? Because then we can talk about it off screen. Because I know Joe, you've already completed it. But yeah.
I'm closing in on it myself, so we can talk about those kinds of things. But Joe, you were about to say something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that like you were talking about disruptive innovation in storytelling in JRPG or in anime and JRPGs, and I think that there's a through line there too, because anime was becoming formulaic until the Evangelions happened, right? Not just Evangelion, but other things too. And first off, a big reason for that was just production. Right, like a lot of the big like holy shit moments of Evangelion were sort of like the jump cut, like experimental phase, because that's all they could do in the short amount of time that they did because they fucked up the budget and production. So like there is a form function dynamic there that's really interesting. But I do think that JRPGs around the PS1 era did experience something really similar, because, I mean, a lot of JRPGs during this time during the early 90s, were very generic, for lack of a better word, right? Like, you're a guy with a sword, you're going through things, you're going through dungeons, and again, part of that was
the hero's journey.
The hero's journey, right? And part of that's technology, but I think that the ones that really pushed it, Megami Tensei, Phantasy Star, even Final Fantasy, that put a subversion on that.
I'm gonna have to say, Legend of Mana. Legend of Mana was one of them last great, the PSX era experimental type games for them.
Oh yeah, 100. Yeah, Legend of Mana is a saga game.
Not super duper, of course it is. Not super duper anime influence, but I absolutely agree with what you're saying as far as that is concerned. I think some of that also was influenced by the fact that, animated cutscenes were such a big thing to experience in the PlayStation era. Like those Final Fantasy VII cutscenes now look horrible, but in '97. That blew your mind.
Oh my gosh.
Whereas something like, I would say, like Dragon Quest VIII has a fairly anime influence to it, but that game fails when it's trying to impress you with its animated cutscenes, because those didn't even look good by '98 standards, but it's like, if you're into tropes, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being into tropes. Like, I myself can like tropes just as much as the next person. Like I just talked about Bravely Default 2. That was one of the most tropey JRPGs that ever exist. although it does kind of like take some risks, and there's some payoff towards the story more towards the end of it. That's also kind of how I feel about Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Like the second game in the series, like the second half of it really picks up like that. And I think that stuff like that can be made for people like that. It's just that I don't want to say that I outgrew it or anything along those lines, because that's just going to make it sound like I don't know, like, let me fly by
bougie,
like swirl my thing or whatever around. But I think that my taste just changed over time, and I moved away from that. But there's plenty of people that, did either of you play like Tales of Arise? Would you call that a tropey game?
That's the game is full trope. Full trope, but
I started it and then I had to put it down because it was so tropey. It was too tropey for me. Like I love the battle system of that game.
But like I said, like a lot of people will love that game.
Yeah,
tropes and all. You know what I mean? Just a quick little tail shout out to Rapide, the best boy.
Oh, best boy. Yeah, easily. But yeah, Seth says tropes drive the Japanese economy, and that's true. And then that carries over to the
wrong. Yeah.
Because it carries the Western economy too, man. Like for media here,
we just have different ones,
right?
And not only that, but like, just to bring up, I talked about Cowboy Bebop earlier, and when they did the live action series, it got so wholly rejected by the fandom because it wasn't close enough to what it, that live action adaptation was not perfect, but it had heart, and it could have been something, but because it wasn't, tropey enough, so to speak, I feel like a lot of people just rejected it on the basis of that, because it wasn't their Cowboy Bebop. And it's like, well, your Cowboy Bebop still existed, like nobody was taking that away from you.
Yeah. I can't speak to the quality of that show, but because to me that looked like shit, but not because it didn't have trope. Like, but yeah, no, I think that is true. Like, remakes, adaptations don't ruin the original necessarily, but they can change cultural
The original still
influence.
exists.
Right.
Yeah, and like, you're going to see that so hotly debated over Final Fantasy VII for the next, 10 to 15 years, which version of it you prefer, or whatever, what have you,
I will always proffer this as a wordsmith myself. It is not called Final Fantasy VII Remastered. It is called Final Fantasy VII Remake. So like, they never pretended it was just going to be an upgrade. Golden Drummer just said something about tropes are comfy and sell, nothing bad about them, but not always the best. I want to point out, going along that line of what they're saying, is I'm a professional wrestling fan. Like, you want to talk about tropes? There's tropes in professional wrestling, brother, that have been around for the last 200 years.
Yeah,
it's what you are comfortable with and what you like, and you start fitting into this and developing this system that you enjoy. So that's what you tend to go to. And certain things are going to turn you off. Certain things are going to be really comfy for you. And just because it's good for me doesn't mean it's good for you. If you like anime, man, enjoy your anime.
I think for myself in general, I can only speak to my own experiences. It's like sometimes you just want like JRPG comfort food, you know, and sometimes you want JRPG stuff that really pushes boundaries and really takes risks. To make like a film analogy, you know, I can watch just like generic action film, like as long as it's done well, like Top Gun Maverick, or you know, not to talk trash about the Marvel movies because that's a whole nother discourse, but you know, like those are action movies through and through, right, you know. Or I will, you know, if I don't want something like that, I could go into more like high cinema, you know, and watch stuff by like Denis Villeneuve, you know, like Dune or Inception or things along those lines. Even those are kind of tropey in their own kinds of ways.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's good to have like a mix of those kinds of things, because without those tropes, you don't appreciate risky storytelling for what it is. You know, like you kind of got to wade through that stuff.
It's a status quo for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, question for you guys: RPG comfort food. Like, if you want to sit down and pick up a game that's just a comfort game for you, maybe one from your childhood, maybe more recently. I can tell you what mine is.
Yeah, go for it.
Mine is Shining Force 2.
Hell yeah.
Oh, Shining Force 2 is so good.
Yeah. Dude, that was a big one for me back in the day. Like, I played that game over and over, man. Like,
found all the secret characters.
And
who would? That game had one of my favorite. That game had one of my favorite units in a strategy game to ever exist. It was that mouse that turned into a ninja.
Oh, Slade.
I can't.
Slade.
Yeah,
Slade Fox, dude.
Yeah. 30% critical rate. I would just throw him in the middle and be like,
he sucks at the beginning when he's the thief, but when he turns into a ninja, he's unstoppable.
Amazing character portrait. Like the Shining Force games really nailed character art well, especially with the Genesis's more limited color palette. They really knew how to make those games pop and be vibrant.
Dude, it's one of the most the visual feedback in it is. I talked a lot about this when we were playing Shining Force on Super RPG Friends, and when I streamed Shining Force 2. But like the UI is just so clean, and it's like simple on the visual feedback you have for stuff. Like it's easy to process and to understand, and it creates this like aesthetic and gameplay synthesis that really just makes that game just like invade your brain, and there's something you can do about it. But I think it's weird because nowadays I've been replaying a lot of stuff that I played back in the day, but usually stuff that I played a long time ago, so I haven't really been like revisiting stuff lately. But Mega Man X, it's not an RPG really, but Mega Man X is something I play at least a couple times a year and work on my speed run route before I realize I'm too old for this shit now. And and I think Chrono Trigger as well. Like Chrono Trigger is one of those games that just like it's such an easy play. Like it's an easy game, but in essence, it's just so the music is easy to take in. It's just like nothing about it feels like stressful or like
nothing overcomplicated.
No, and it's short and sweet too. Short and sweet too as well. I had mentioned Earthbound. Earthbound is a little bit of a longer game, so I don't know that I could really go with that. Joey kind of stole mine with Trigger. So like Chrono Trigger would have been a good one. So I guess I would have to say, if I was just to sit down and try to gun through something, probably be Phantasy Star 4, because Phantasy Star 4 is just another one of them. You know, the pacing and I think we all have this common theme where like the pacing of those games is just incredible. You know, Chrono Trigger never misses a beat. You know, like nothing feels out of place. You're constantly moving along. Phantasy Star 4, you're constantly moving along. I forget the game you said, but I feel like that was true of that as well. Yeah, Shining Force 2, constantly moving along. Secret of Mana is another one that I could sit down and go through at almost any given point in time. Because again, like just constantly moving. Although you could really make a grind out of that game if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, same with Shining Force too. That's what I think is really strong about that game, is that like a big part of your engagement with that game is how you play it. Like, I mean, to me personally, the thing I like the most is grinding the shit out of the characters. It's just like something about that's fun, and it's like, and it's weird because I'm usually an anti-grinder, right? Like I try to go through RPGs without grinding as much as possible unless something is particularly engaging. Mostly so I could
I'm in
build
the same
Twitter
boat.
clout and tell people that you can beat the game without grinding. But
Yeah, absolutely.
but
60 retweets.
yes, but like I mean,
this doing damn, this doing numbers, you know.
6 likes.
You know.
But yeah. So like Shining Force 2 has that element to it. I think even Chrono Trigger kind of does, right? Because like there are parts in that game that with enemies that give you AP, like a lot of AP, that you can spend like 40 minutes an hour grinding pretty earlier in the mid game and get like massively overpowered, and it's like kind of fun because you unlock different skills and
double text and triple text and all
triple
that.
text and stuff along those lines. I would argue we see that grinding can sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time. You know, it's sort of the best designed JRPGs like Suikoden. I feel there's a natural progression curve that occurs in those JRPGs where you don't necessarily have to grind, but the game itself will reward you for it. And somebody had said that in Discord, and I love that because it's so true. Like a game like Dragon Quest XI is one of my favorite games. Yeah, that game got released of all time. And if you want to go after metal slimes for hours on end, that game will allow you to do that, and you can jack your characters to high heaven. But it's not a game where that's required. And I feel like you also have a more, I don't know how to say it, it's like a more organic experience fighting bosses when you're not over leveled, you know, because it's nothing to me if I can nuke a boss in 6 turns. Of course that boss is going to be easy, but if you hit that boss at the point where you'd have just naturally got there without grinding, it's a much different experience.
Right.
The Mega 10 games do that really, really well because you can't really overlevel your characters.
Yeah.
At some points of the game, I would say, like Nocturne, you're not going to face Death Rider without that fight being extremely, you know, Matador. Well, I said Death Rider, the poor English localization in PS2, but yes.
But yeah, no, I think that's okay. What you said about DQ11, by the way, I need to step on a soapbox real fast. Play that game on Stronger Monsters because that, holy shit, it's so much better of an experience. I swear to God.
Yeah.
But like, and you really see that loop more with Stronger Monsters because you really like it makes you have to keep up with everything. It makes you use all the mechanics in the system.
Right.
But like, so one game I think that is like almost like antithetical to what Thomas just said is SMT5. So I love SMT5. I'm not shitting on it at all. I'm one of the few like old head Mega 10 people who like, or at least in the US, who actually really enjoyed it. But the problem with it now, so imagine DQ11's like Metal Slime, like pragmatic grinding TM.
Yes.
But but you have to like you can just buy a key that makes metal slimes appear everywhere. So what the fuck is the point? Why would you? It's predatory.
Yeah,
it sucks.
Yeah.
Like absolutely. Not only that, and it's like, you know, people talked about Tales of Arise. You know, I brought up Tales of Arise earlier. You can buy double experience boosts in that.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where you wonder if it's like, am I doing this just out of a thing for convenience, or the developers pushing me into these microtransactions?
Exactly.
Right.
It's like if you're gonna design something around the microtransaction, why didn't you just design it around as a gameplay mechanic? Like it just it fucking sucks. And sorry, that's another topic. But
episode 2.
I played through Tokyo Mirage Sessions on the Wii U when it was first released, and that game was fairly grind heavy. But the Encore version that exists on the Switch, they give you a ton of DLC right off the bat, and you can go to these areas where basically you can fight like the metal slime type areas and just throw your characters into the stratosphere and never have to look back. You know, and I think that sometimes JRPGs can be fun like that when you break them, but not typically like 10 to 12 hours into them, you know, where you are just basically massively, you know, curb stopping literally every enemy that you run into.
So there comes a time in every Final Fantasy that's like Final Fantasies generally for the most part are always evenly paced up until like a certain point where everything just opens up and you can just go grind. And that's where the super bosses come into play. 7 was the first time that I ever remember like actually sitting down and grinding up to 99 because I wanted to beat Emerald Weapon.
Go
ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just thought in my head. It's like I think that the best part of like a JRPG or a strategy RPG, if you've ever played like a Civilization games, it's that moment where the scales just start to tip a little bit towards you. You know, like just that,
Right.
that sort of like you've got it, like and it's just you start to build momentum and like you're going to come out of it all right, but there's just enough tension there that you can't feel like you make any mistakes or anything along those lines. And when you grind your characters up, and I'm pro grinding. I mean, I'm pro play the game however you want, but I have noticed from my own perspective, like when you grind your characters up like that, you're taking that moment away. Like you're not going to have that experience. You're not going to have that experience. Like Joey talked about Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I know he played it on hard, and I don't. That game is very generous with its bonus experience pool, and I know that you had said that at some point or another. You're like, yeah, it's very easy to overlevel your characters, even if it's by complete accident. And but you were talking about Emerald Weapon and that fucking mess.
Yeah. Well, that Emerald Weapon, I was about to say that's my first encounter with a super boss, but it's not. My first encounter with a super boss actually comes from a game that you can't outgrind, which is Super Mario RPG for the SNES.
For Kulix.
Yeah, Kulix.
Yeah. You can't, because the max level in Mario RPG is 30.
Oh, 30. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so you can't go above 30. So it's really, especially if you use the frog coins to get the double XP thing, it's really not that hard to hit max level. But that boss doesn't change. He doesn't become less difficult. It's about skill, and then if you cheese it with certain equipment, and Princess Peach becomes an unstoppable tank.
That's what Frank did on Super RPG Friends. He smoked that boss, dude. It was awesome.
Like, if you've got a lot of rock candy in your inventory, that thing is going down. You just the one crystal only has 800 health, so you just whip a bunch of them up there and you're good. But yeah, like you said, you could smoke that thing. I would love a link to that. To see that, I haven't fought that boss in ages.
Golden asked a question that I was literally just about to say, and it was kind of targeted to Thomas too. So Golden asks, random side question: what does the group think about games where there's no max level when you grind stats? Bro, that's why I love Saga games, man. That's why Saga games are.
That would have been my go-to answer.
And I think that those are always the most rewarding games because it really puts emphasis on the player. That being said, that does not mean that like grinding doesn't mean you cannot grind. There's always something to grind, right? Even in Saga Frontier, where enemies scale to you, or Romancing Saga 3, where enemies scale to you, or Scarlet Grace, despite the fact that enemies scale, the power creep, if you understand the systems, will always kind of
just slightly favor you. I don't really, and I don't really have anything. That's a fantastic answer. I don't really have anything to add to that. I'm more of a fan of being able to, your stats matter more than your level. So I'm always going to be geared towards making, those things in general better.
Where would you rank Disgaea and what you guys are talking about? Because that is nothing but grind.
Grinding, yeah. But that's okay. That's okay though, because that's what it doesn't. It doesn't try to be something it's not. Like that's the appeal. Oh, this is my opinion. That's the appeal of Disgaea to me.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah, absolutely. Like that is a game that is meant to be grinded and played forever until you don't want to do it anymore. Basically.
Right. Like you can beat the story mode. You can beat the story mode of Disgaea with very minimal grinding. And the stories in those games are so expertly written and so hilarious and over the top and a lot of fun. But if you want to grind,
it's there, man.
That's just all you do.
Yeah. Like there's a ton of bonus content. They do a good job of the bonus content that is there for the reward for grinding is very fan servicey and very done well, which I appreciate. I just recently finished Disgaea 6. I wasn't a huge fan of Disgaea 6 because so much of that game could play itself, like it really could. But I did enjoy the story and the characters in it. But 5 will still probably be my favorite for a while. I just saw that they announced 7, and hopefully they can get that. 6 also had some performance issues, and hopefully they can get that to run a little bit better. A good example, I think, of a game that I can't believe it just sort of came to me that you can't really like. are the Fire Emblem games, where
That's
you can grind, but you are still beholden to the RNG of your growths. Like you can have, and I think that is a great example of a series that, I was talking to Joie in the Discord about this. He says, like you may have a version of a character that is an unstoppable killing machine that turned out to be like horrible for me. On my most recent Three Houses playthrough, I had Casper, and Casper, if you look at tier lists, everybody's like, throw him on the bench, but Casper was incredible.
He was begging for you.
Like, incredible for me, and I think that that's a great example of a game. You can always grind random battles and stuff like that, but if your character's growths go to hell, there's nothing you can do about it. And it's like that gets back to what Joey was saying about the power creep always just slightly being in your favor.
And also new Fire Emblem games from Awakening on, pretty much.
Right.
I mean, you could argue before, but to me the big threshold is Awakening. But from Awakening on, they become Disgaea. Like Fire Emblem stopped being as much of like a more of a strategy game than it did become a game like Disgaea. Or maybe, to be more fair to it, or at least pejoratively fair, I think it started to become more like the gameplay loop of FF Tactics, right?
Where they're less punishing.
Yeah, and it's it's not really just about the punishing, but it's about the things that you're offered, right? So like FF Tactics is, I think, my best comparison here, because you could beat FF Tactics without grinding. You're going to hate your fucking life if you do. But the big fun of it is the job being it's like opening up to be a job slut.
Yeah,
like
busted. Yeah.
And now I had a situation where grinding and tactics actually counteracted, and I had grinded up Ramza too far with the shouting and sitting in the corner, and I'm gonna make Ramza a super boss, but everybody else sucks, and then all the enemies scale to Ramza, and I was like, oh, I can't beat this game. Like I grinded myself into being unable to beat the game.
Yeah, and then you get that 1v1 fight where you have to fight, what's his name? Was it Wheatgraph?
I forget what it is. Like
everybody ate that fight. Yes,
after the first failure of that, and it becoming the gate to where like I was either like, oh, I'm either gonna never play this game again because I can't beat this fight. You go back, you just make him a Lancer. And
I remember I made him a time mage, and I just beat him to death with my fists in that game because I knew that fight was coming. I'm like, those are the kind of games that, like, when they cheat, you got to cheat harder. Dude, you got to push back.
There's a moment in Path of Radiance, Fire Emblem 9, where that happens, and it's the V-Graph thing all over again, except maybe worse. It's like, I think it actually might be worse, because like you're at the mercy of RNG at higher difficulties in that. And if you played on JP Mania with Path of Radiance, good fucking luck. That boss is gonna just bend you over.
I love that there was no, I forget how the difficulty was it Path of Radiance, or was it where it was like the normal was the Japanese hard and there was no easy mode? But the Fire Emblem games, like you said, from Awakening on, it's so interesting because Awakening was their make it or break it game. If that game didn't do well, there weren't going to be any more Fire Emblem games.
Yeah.
And
it was the Final Fantasy, whatever.
That game obviously took off for them. And then after that happened, when they had released Birthright and I can't remember the one with the purple cover on it. Conquest was very punishing, probably the most difficult Fire Emblem game because you can't really grind. You're limited.
Well, you could grind with DLC, which is also, but like,
I mean, like,
it's the level design though.
The developer's vision.
The level design sucks. Wait, Chet, are you a Fire Emblem fan at all?
Too.
So we kind of mentioned this earlier about when I feel like I'm losing out on something. It hurts me. I'm paralyzed by it. Permadeath in Fire Emblem is hard for me. It is really hard. So the newer games, I know it's supposed to be hard and it's supposed to be designed that way, and I'm just like, life sucks enough, man. I don't need life to suck in my video games too. So the newer games where they actually like they take away the permadeath, I enjoy those a little bit more. But that's a personal choice. Me.
Absolutely. Like, again, that gets back to what
I love strategy games.
That gets back to what we're saying. Just like play the game however you want.
Exactly.
Fire Emblem games are so subjective in general because they will allow you to tailor your experience to what you like. And even within that, you know, you're going to have a different experience than I did just based on what I was talking about earlier with things like character growth or whatever. And yeah, and you're right, man. Conquest really did, Joey. You're so right. Conquest really did have like absolutely horrible map design. I mean, like I don't know if that was intentional or not, just to make it more difficult.
It was just bad design. To me, it was bad design. Maybe I'm being too harsh on it. I don't know, but I have an epistemological question for you guys. Okay, here's something about grinding. That's a good question because Shell brought it up, and I need to address it. And so grinding, okay. Games with random encounters or unavoidable encounters. If you're just fighting every encounter, okay, and you end up over leveled, or maybe if you're just fighting every encounter, is that grinding?
No, that's a good question. I don't think so either.
I don't think so.
I typically will fight most encounters because it's just easier than running. I mean, as long as my resources are managed correctly. I would call it grinding at the moment where you actually decide to seek out encounters. You know,
okay, what about this question? Because this is, I feel like, related to it, and there's like layers, right? So that's like you can't quite answer it before. Xenoblade 3 is a really good example. Exploring and fighting monsters as you explore, because games with bigger worlds, right? You know, like you're getting into more battles, like it just, you know, whatever. The grind. Hey, thank you for the follow. The grinding is kind of integrated into the exploration, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's baked in.
Oh, the sub. Thank you, Dylan. Dude, thank you. Hell yeah.
I think grinding is a state of mind. Like
I would agree with that.
It depends on how you're feeling at the moment. Are you exploring? Are you like, oh, I want to see what's over on that other cliff? Then you're just exploring. That's not grinding. But if you're like, my sword or blade master, I don't want to lose to some little fat kid with green hair that I lost to 3 times, so I'm not exploring anymore. I'm grinding because for some reason I'm 6 levels above him and he keeps one-shotting me. That's great.
But yeah, like I said, like I would agree with that answer. I think it becomes grinding at the point where you start where you consciously think about it, and when you're simply exploring, if you're picking fights with like literally everything. I mean, Xenoblade is such a, especially the third game, it's such a unique factor in that because there's you know, you have your common monsters, you have your blue tier monsters, you have your unique monsters, you know, and you have your sparklies type sort of thing, and there is, you know, you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do. You can grind really efficiently in those games. And
thank you for the. So I'm just interjecting this with just a statement. Thank you for the raid, Frank. Really appreciate it. I hope your stream went well.
Oh boy.
But all right. So furthermore, another grinding. Like I feel like I'm playing devil's advocate about grinding, but I think it's interesting. So let's say
I'll be right back, guys.
Hell yeah, go for it.
Right back. Yeah, 1 sec.
Let's say you're grinding. Or what? Not grinding. What am I saying? Let's say you get to a boss, the little fat kid with green hair, as you so eloquently put it,
who shall remain nameless,
and he fucks you up raw, right? Yeah. Now, what's your instinct there? Sometimes people will be like, "Oh shit, this boss is really hard. Let me go grind because that's what I have to do." When the answer is just like equipping an accessory or doing this, so like when do you result to the grind? Like
I will tell you from personal experience as a pro silver-haired gamer that's been playing RPGs since Miracle Warriors on the Sega Master System. My first instinct is that it's me. One of the really cool things that I love the addition in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is the hero classes. So as soon as the hero classes start unlocking, I'm like, oh, I just want to unlock all the classes. It's a shame that our job prostitute, what are we calling them? He
job
just left.
Job slut. Yeah.
I love it. Bring on all the classes. When I came up to that boss fight, I knew instantly the boss fight started that I was not optimally set up for this. I only had one healer. and 3 tanks and 3 DPS, and that's not going to cut it
for
a boss fight.
Yeah.
So then my instinct was like, okay, this is me. So I always check myself first, and I check my strategy first. But then when I switch over and I've got an optimal setup, and then everybody's getting one shot, it's like, okay, so is it an accessory thing? And it's like, no, my accessory is good, everything's good. Either I suck or I just need to go grind, and I know I don't suck. So yeah, then it's time to hit the grinding. Always check yourself first, because it might just be a mechanics thing that you're missing.
Or it could be something as simple as just like, you came into a boss poorly equipped. They're absorbing, they're absorbing an element you're weak against.
Right.
Lines. We talked about Final Fantasy 7 earlier, Final Fantasy 7 remake. And that's what made the Hell House such a hard fight for so many people.
Yes.
Because that fight gets dropped on you, and there's nothing you can really do about it. So if you don't have the right elements or setups, knowing that going into it, you're toast. I will also typically, you always check yourself first. Maybe different class configuration, maybe different accessory setup, maybe a different a different anything. You know what I mean? Grinding, I think that grinding should kind of just be like, last resort. If you've ever played, has anybody here ever played Terranigma on the SNES?
Oh, yeah.
Terranigma is a game that, you'll know if you're not ready to fight the bosses level-wise.
Ease, too. Ease is very much like that. Bump combat ease is 100% that, because, you'll touch a boss and then, do, this much damage and then be like, oh, shit. But, that's a game that, is designed around moving you around areas in such a way where you have to fight stuff to get through it so that you're the proper level. And almost all RPGs are curated in that sense. The XP curve is, in a good game or even a mid game, EXP curve is always very deliberate, right? And I think
absolutely.
With what Shell said about, she says, not going out of my way to level above content makes me feel like I'm making the game more challenging, requires outthinking the game. I agree. I need to push. Sometimes I want to push it. Yeah. But if it's a game that I'm not really vibing with, or the battle system isn't engaging, I don't give a shit. If it's a numbers game, it's a linear numbers game, and that's it. It's not a fun thing, then I'm going to do that. Yeah.
One thing that I hate are bloated numbers. I prefer the smaller, more distinct numbers. Just recently,
we just talked about this guy.
Yeah. Oh man, I only did 7 billion on that last attack. I was hoping for 7.5. No, I just recently played through Lunar Silver Star Story Complete on stream, and those level ups in that game are so numbers wise would be significant. They are significant, but it's only one extra attack. So there's no such thing as really out grinding the boss fight in that game. I almost said his name. Oh, I almost spoiled it for everybody.
Poopy McPooperson.
But when you fight the boss in that game, he's notoriously difficult. I don't know if it is in the CD version, but in the Silver Star Story Complete, he's notoriously difficult. And I was 10 levels above the recommended level, but that it doesn't really matter because that's only 10 extra attack at the most.
I had talked a little bit earlier about Phantasy Star 4, and I've talked to Joey about this in the past, where it's you can grind to a certain point in that game, but going to that last boss, your party members and your configuration mean a lot more than what your individual numbers were. If you take Raja into that last fight,
you could do it super.
The game's over. Take him if you're desperate to get the game over. Whereas if you take somebody who's the boomerang user,
Kyra.
Yeah, if you're going to have a little bit more of a difficult time. And I think, I agree with a lot of what Shelly just said there, where it's it becomes a numbers game, that's not, you shouldn't have to feel like you have to outthink the game in order to, make forward progress.
Yeah.
The best JRPGs have that baked into it. And Saga, you just grind stats,
Yeah. So I hate to cut anybody off here too, but we are getting up to our time.
I see. It's been fun.
Yeah, and it's because there's just, I think this is a fun experiment too, because it was very loose. At first I was like, oh, let's take a topic and make it curated, but I think it's fun to sort of keep things a little bit loose. If there's anything that anybody in the chat or anybody listening or watching thinks would be a really interesting topic for us to tackle in more granular detail next stream, let us know. That's why we're streaming this instead of just recording it and doing whatever, because like that interaction I think is a lot of fun, especially with CS. But that being said, I want everyone to say one last like thing about this subject. So I'll start off, and then you guys can carry the torch.
Sure.
My big statement about grinding in video games, it's a very simple thing. It's a very simple request, and it's play Saga Scarlet Grace.
Working on it.
Chet, what about you? Anything you want to close out that segment with?
When it comes to grinding, the best RPGs are awesome.
Yeah.
I love the avenue that is RPGs because as someone who wants to become a published author, if you were to look at the word count for, let's just say, the first Harry Potter book and compare that to the word count in Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy VI is so much more. It is such an amazing way to tell a story. And if you have someone who's an expert story crafter and you give them such a wide open book, basically, or the game, just to be able to tell such a large, impactful story. If you've got someone who's really good at it, like the people who wrote Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy X or Chrono Trigger, you give them that opportunity. It's such an amazing way to tell a story. And for me, some of those stories have impacted me throughout my life, which is why even if they're throwing out some shovelware sometimes, I will always be playing RPGs. That is my go-to.
Hell yeah. Same. Thomas, anything you want to close this out?
I don't really have too much, man. I don't know how to follow. That's a tough act to follow,
right? Yeah, that's all right. I'm glad I went first.
I would just kind of touch on that as well, and I would say that the best JRPGs from a storytelling perspective, what I find that tends to stick with me the most is the music in those games. So when I'm replaying Earthbound and I hear like the summer's theme or like the winter's theme or even like the Onett Town themes, I can go back to those moments in my own personal life where I first experienced them and just kind of reevaluate not to be all existential or anything along those lines, but just kind of reevaluate like where my life has gone and things along those lines since those moments. And I think that when you talk about them as storytelling as a medium, there's just so much to be able to explore and craft with the tools that they're just the sheer amount of time that it takes to play through RPGs allows them to create these truly grand sweeping epics in a way visually and artistically that is just not capable through other media. So I'm happy to, it's like you say, like even a bad JRPG is probably and the word bad is very subjective. It's probably still worth experiencing just through that the nature of it alone.
You just outed yourself as an Unlimited Saga fan too. I just want you to know.
I know, right? Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, thank you guys so much. That was awesome closing notes for both of you guys. That was rad. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Thanks, chat, for hanging out. I'm gonna post some socials for the boys here. This is Thomas's Twitter, and then right here's Chet's Twitch. You guys should give him some follows, give him some likes, give him some subscribes. But yeah, thanks for joining me on a weekday night too, and Chet, thank you for bringing in some folks, and Thomas for getting the time wrong, but also actually being on time despite that. Like you really weren't late. That
accidentally
like 10
on
minutes
time.
Late. Yeah.
One last sign off.
Yeah, go for it.
I did a whole stream about how Mia is the actual hero of Lunar Silver Star Story.
Ooh.
So just to throw that out there, if you guys are curious.
Anything you guys want to plug? Oh, actually, Thomas, anything that you want to plug? Because he just used his plug.
Oh God, I don't have any. I guess you could follow my girlfriend on Twitter. She at the Bejeweled. Joey, if you could put a link up there for me.
Yeah. Let me.
I'd appreciate that. That's all I really have to plug.
Joey, can I say that I used my one good plug on Mia? Is that?
Yeah,
can I say
think
that
so.
on your
Yeah,
podcast?
it sounds a little horny, but like
well,
as
I
long
meant
as
it to. So
we always try to keep a little innuendo here.
All right.
So it's good. But yeah, thank you guys again. Hopefully, we'll see you next week, and we'll see where this goes. I'm really excited to do this podcast, and obviously, one thing about Cerulean Skies is that it's sort of like it's an FF6 ensemble, right? So it's not just like main character syndrome. Hopefully, like doesn't mean I'll always be here too. So, but yeah, obviously join the Discord if you're not part of it. Come hang out, make fun of me, roast Chet and Thomas for not liking anime, all that fun stuff. We'll put the VOD up on YouTube and podcast stuff. So. Again, thanks so much, guys.
Happy to be here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yep. All right.
Take care, y'all. Have a good night.